Hello, this is Roger Durling, Executive Director of the Santa Barbara International Film Festival, and welcome to this conversation about the film Judas and the Black Messiah, directed by Shaka King, who also co-wrote the script and is the producer, starring Daniel Kaluuya as Hampton and Dominique Fishback as Deborah Johnson. Daniel Kaluuya, for his performance in this movie, is nominated for the Critics' Choice Award, a Golden Globe Award, and a Screen Actors Guild Award. And the film is nominated for a Writers Guild of America Award for Best Original Screenplay, co-written by Shaka King. So here's our conversation. I'm going to start with Shaka. Shaka, this is not your typical straightforward biopic where we're used to seeing, can you tell us why is it that you tackle Fred Hampton story in a non-traditional, biopic style?
Well, I mean, it was baked into the pitch that the Lucas brothers brought me in 2016, where they said they wanted to make a movie about Fred Hampton and William O'Neill that they envisioned as The Departed set inside the world of COINTELPRO. And so I, without even asking them, instantly knew that the reason for couching the film in genre was just that that was the only way you'd get a movie like this made. I mean, aside Fred's, politics aside, I think just, the sheer lack of name recognition within Hollywood specifically, I think it would have been really challenging to get a traditional Fred Hampton biopic made. So, that was the genius of the pitch that the Lucas brothers put forth. It was a way to, as Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. says, put the medicine inside the applesauce.
Correct. But when, you co-wrote the script, was it always, that the entryway was going to be O'Neill into the story?
I think even more so in the original versions of the script, that was the case. It was later that we kind of actually realized that what we wanted to do, because that didn't feel quite right for O'Neill to be your eyes and ears inside the Panthers. And so what we really did was we sought to, in a sense, manipulate the audience into thinking that's what they were watching by introducing this interview, that O'Neill gave for To Eyes on the Prize 2 as kind of like a narrative device, not only bookending the film, but kind of charting, O'Neill's sort of journey throughout the film. But in reality, when you're watching the movie, in terms of the Illinois chapter and Fred Hampton's journey, that's really told through the eyes of Deborah Johnson, if you really, pay attention to it. And so there's a bit of sleight of hand that's going on in the filmmaking.
Correct. Dominique, at the end of the film, you're 9 months pregnant and you shield with your body Fred, which is quite a remarkable feat. How did that inform the character for you and your relationship with Fred, that she's 9 months pregnant and she shields with her own body?
Yeah, that was something that I talked to Shaka about from the very beginning. Like, how do I get there in love? So I want to make sure that everything we do up into that, I'm building to get to that point, because I don't know how many people would actually do that in real life. So I really wanted to get inside her world, and that's where the journaling come into play. I really journaled every day as the character. I put a lot of Nina Simone songs to the scenes that
Wow.
we shared together, Langston Hughes, and I really just wanted to develop the emotional world, so that even, and there was a bunch of poems that I wrote that I shared with Daniel, that's not in the film, but it allowed me to get that world going, so that even if we don't see it or hear it in the movie, when she looks at him, behind her eyes, you could hopefully see that there's a whole world that they shared together.
Daniel, your voice is, you totally transform. You're unrecognizable. The diction, the voice it's quite complex. Can you tell us how did you arrive to developing the voice of Fred Hampton?
It's a lot of work, man. One of the biggest moments was at the very beginning, when I first attempted the voice. I was with Shaka. We spent 4 days in a room and went through the script, talk about it, and then we did Chairman Fred's actual speeches, like not the ones in the script, but the actual speeches, and we were just playing with the voice in that sense, and then speaking about what it sounded to me, then really listening to what it sounded to Shaka and how he described it. There's a couple of references that like I want to say that, like, but they were like, you're like, oh wow, okay, cool, okay, I see that. Then I'll go away and I'll figure out something. And then working with the amazing dialect coach Audrey Lacrone, and we just kind of just bit by bit kind of chipped at it. And she saw that, like, oh, you have the tendency to damage your voice while you project. So she advised me to get a singing coach, and I found an opera singing coach. So I sat down with that and then studied, like engaged my diaphragm, conditioned my vocal cords, but also studied cadence. I treated the speeches like songs. I saw it as the talking version of singing as opposed to the singing version of talking. Mm-hmm. And I would treat them as songs, and then I would go there, and then he had a different cadence to when he spoke, something that was expressed in that 4 days in with Shaka. It's a different cadence to when he speaks than when he does speeches. And it's how do you own those two spaces but still feel like the same person, you know? And it was just a lot of work, a lot of things I've never done before, you know, just follow your nose.
Mm-hmm. Shaka, you start the movie in such a bold way, which is with Hoover and surrounded with all those white agents. It's an incredible setup. You know, can you tell us about that scene and how did it arrive for that to be one of the opening moments in the movie?
You know, the irony of that is that I had to be dragged kicking and screaming to write that scene. You know, so really it was the vision of the producers in the studio to start the movie with Hoover kind of addressing his troops. And there was a desire to contextualize the National Party. So the original version of that scene started with Hoover talking about Huey Newton, talking about Bobby Seale, talking about Eldridge Cleaver, and then ending with Fred Hampton. And it was like 5 minutes of exposition, which made me want to jump off of a bridge. And so we had a negotiation process where we agreed, okay, we'll let the Panthers introduce themselves via archival, where they'll talk about themselves and their politics, and you know, that they'll be their entry point into the history. And then we'll come to the Hoover scene and transition so you can see the scope of what they're up against and get that scale and get that intimidation factor. And when we did that, it was like perfect, you know what I mean? And it was a great way to introduce, because we set up, you know, a lot of the national leaders of the party, but you don't see the real Chairman Fred until you reveal him in the Hoover Auditorium, and it's Daniel, you know? And so that gives us, I think, you know, first you have the punch of seeing Hoover and you know, as Sentinels, and then you have the punch of being introduced to Daniel as Chairman Fred Hampton. And it's just really a powerful moment that I'm really glad they made me fight to, you know, they made me like keep, you know what I mean? Because it really is very incredibly effective.
Yeah, it's pretty striking. You know, Dominic, your relationship with Fred, I is so fascinating. The fact that she's able to almost humanize him in a way, and then he in return, you know, turns on your activist spirit. You know, can you tell us about that dynamic and that evolution of the relationship?
Yeah, I think for whatever reason, we kind of ended up shooting almost in order. And so my first day on set was the first day she actually meets Chairman Fred. So I think that energy, like Shaka talks about, the energy of kind of being new, seeing Daniel in character for the first time, I'm really excited. And then kind of as we move forward, somebody actually, it was like a college student who brought this up to me, but there's a scene where he tells her to have discipline with the cops, and then by the end she has to have the most discipline ever, you know, and I just hear his voice at the end saying that. I think for Daniel and I, we just talked about the quiet moments, the fact that they were really young teenagers, 19, 20, 21, and we, you know, everything else is moving really fast and we're focused on the war that they're in. But in the private moments, how do we show that they're just kids falling for each other and maybe they don't know everything?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Daniel, the I'm a Revolutionary scene is just freaking epic. You know, can you tell us about shooting that scene and you know, how did you go about that big speech?
I think I did so much dialect work that I had the speeches like learned before we started shooting, if I'm being honest. So it's kind of like I had it. That's what I was doing the Queen of Sin press, and that's why I text Shaka just before I left. I was like, "Yo, you sure ain't you sure ain't no changes?" Because there's a tendency to make there's changes usually happen on this shoot. So I said to make changes because I want to learn, like get to know it. I mean, you start to learn it, but then you got to know it. You know what I'm saying? So, and I'm doing it in between press. So yeah, and then we showed up that day. It was 450 people. Shaka pulled up and said, "We're shooting a rehearsal." And I was like, "Okay." And then went downstairs and went up and did it. Like it's that I have this saying that I learned I had when I was used to improv as a kid. Like when you're in your head, you're dead. And those are moments you can't be in your head. You know, you just got to just do. And just do and help yourself, because my vocal cords, I was losing my voice on that day, you know. So make sure you're protecting, make sure you're like protecting your energy. And then I had the incredible background artists of Cleveland that was supporting me. You know what I'm saying? It's like those times when my voice was going, or I was tired, or wasn't hitting, they were like, "No, you could do it, you could do it." They were just calling me Chairman Fred, like they were calling me Chairman Fred for a whole day. So it was a special day.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it. I told Dominic I've seen it a few times, the film, and that scene just gives me goosebumps every time I see it. And your performance is Shakespearean, it's phenomenal. Shaka, you almost humanize the Agent Miller in the script and in the film. You know, can you tell us about doing that? I mean, I'm not saying I think it's a terrific choice, but can you tell us about humanizing Miller?
Well, I mean, I think it's more, so one of the things we discovered was that this guy had investigated the Freedom Riders murders in Mississippi. And so it was just fascinating to us that he, you know, years apart was investigating the Klan, and then, you know, years later was tasked with dismantling the Illinois chapter of the Panthers. And that was just like, I thought there was a real opportunity there to just show the complexity of really, you know, white centrism as an ideology. You know what I mean? Like, this is a guy who, you know, he thinks he's doing the right thing in a lot of ways. And, you know, I think it's been interesting to sort of watch how different viewers view that character. Like, we were really fortunate in that before the pandemic happened, we had a screening with like 6 Black, you know, audience members and 6 white audience members. And their reads of that character were fascinating because, you know, a lot of the white audience members were like, well, he didn't seem like, you know, to be that bad of a person. I was wondering, like, when he made the shift was, you know, our Black audience members were like, what are you talking about? He compared the Panthers to the Klan, and that told me everything I needed to know about him right then and there. And so to me, it was just a rich opportunity to put forth a character like that is complex the way that people are complex. And it was an opportunity to indict, you know, what an ideology I personally think falls short of any kind of actual allyship in, you know, being a centrist who's actually aligned with the white power structure.
Dominic, you actually met and you actually work with the real, you know, Deborah, you know, Mama Akua Njeri. You know, can you tell us about meeting her, about sitting down and you know, working with her? And also, you know, was there pressure on you to you know, do justice to her character?
Yeah, I don't know so much so that it was pressure, but it was a huge responsibility for all of us. And I think I just like prayed that I could be a vessel for the for Spirit and for the love that she experienced with Chairman Fred to flow through. But we went to Chicago before filming, and we sat around the table for over 7 hours. And Chairman Fred, Chairman Fred Jr. wanted to know why every single one of us wanted to do this film. And then Mama Akua pulled Daniel and I aside and talked about being a vessel and spirit flowing through. And she said, well, what if my spirit don't mess with your spirit? And every time Daniel would like talk, she was like, oh, he's speaking my language. I like him. And I was like, oh, maybe I'm not making the best impression. But then afterwards, I gave her a hug and I said, I hope you know my heart. And she said, I do. I just had to give you a bit of a hard time. She said she wanted to make sure there was no punkness in me. So, but I definitely understood that. And then getting to set, again, there's not a lot of footage of her at that age. So I really had to kind of go internal. And when she came to set to visit, she said, oh, you did that scene. That was a Deborah Johnson up there. So it made me feel good because it felt like everything that I instinctively was doing or making room for, it resonated with her. One of the things that she said was, during the assassination, she didn't cry. So it was really important to Shaka and all of us that we respected that. And then the other thing she mentioned was that the Panthers were very disciplined and they didn't speak out of turn, and that there was some things that maybe my character would say in the movie that she would never have said. And so it caused me to look at the dialogue closely and say, well, why would she feel, from reading it, why would she feel this way? And how could I then bring that level of love and respect into it that I think she's calling towards. And I learned that Chairman Fred allowed people to believe in him and trust him. And when you trust people, you don't have to be so defensive all the time. And I think that's what I learned from my cast and crew and what I learned from Daniel. So watching him and getting to work with him allowed me to be soft in ways that I never was before. And I think ultimately it helped me to bring that level of depth to the story.
Yeah, Daniel, all I knew about Fred Hampton was about the way he was murdered, that horrific way he was murdered. Can you tell us about, the research that you did and learning about him and et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, like seeing how much of a leader he was at like 14, actually, he got onto, correct me if I'm wrong, Shaka, but he got onto the FBI watch list at 14 years old, and because he was a swimming pool that he wanted black people to go to. And I just found there's not a lot of information out there. Tell you this, the beginning process, I was reading a lot of books, and like you said, it was like all about his murder. Nothing was about his life. I didn't really trust the perspective. So the information, I had like dribs and drabs of information, and like there's loads of like, now because the film's out, there's loads of like footage of Chairman Fred that I would have needed in the process. But we were like having a minute clip here and a 4-minute clip here and a 5-minute clip there. So I just heard about that, how he listened to Malcolm X speeches and Martin Luther King speeches. So I did that. You just like drips and pieces. But for me, it was like the Rainbow Coalition, Yeah. That really blew my mind. And the work that he did that and how instrumental he was with that, and kind of like going to different communities, especially the young patriots, Confederate flag bearing, and understanding, having conflict with them, understand there's points of interest. But that doesn't mean to sacrifice your love for blackness and love for the black community. You can join, but if it is to sacrifice, then it's not possible. Like the fact that his mind thought that way and he was able to pitch it to his comrades and then able to action it is incredible. It's genuinely incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned already, I've seen the film 3 times, and the things that he was advocating, for healthcare, for, anti-police brutality, systemic racism. I mean, there are things that, we're still fighting for. It's pretty mind-boggling. Shaka, the idea of I think you addressed it a little bit, the fact that there are so many strong themes and lessons to learn from this film, but at the same time, it's a highly entertaining film. You know, we mentioned the 70s film cinema. You know, was that something that was difficult for you to balance? You know, the sort of lessons and also the entertainment aspect of the film.
I think you muted, Shaka.
Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you, Dominic.
You know, it wasn't because so much of what's entertaining about the film on the sort of, you know, if you want to call that the history, let's call it the vegetables, right? What's entertaining about the vegetables is the performances. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, you typically, I think we probably went into this, well, that's not true, because we structured it as such, in the sense of, you know, even our decision to shoot the speeches like concerts. That's why we watched like Watt Stacks, and why we watched When We Were Kings, and, you know, stole from those movies. But our intention was to make those pieces set pieces, just as much as our, you know, action and genre elements are set pieces. We felt like the speeches and even the quiet moments, you know, and were really just strong showcases for amazing performances. And, you know, casting these wonderful actors, you know, but not having worked with them, we saw the potential for it. But then to see that stuff come to life, you know, I mean, the moment between Deborah and Fred, you know, when she reads him the poem, is so strong that we cut a trail out of it, you know. So, you know, I mean, we just were gifted with these incredible performances, and you know, just the wonderful work by our DP Sean Bobbitt, our production designer Sam Lysenko, you know, our costume designer Charlene Antoinette Jones, our hair, you know, hair artist Rebecca Woodford. Like, all of these individuals, they created just a very real tapestry. And I think it's just as entertaining as the like Sidney Lumet of it all that we were trying to tap into.
Yeah. You know, can you tell us about working with your composers, you know, Mark Isham, and then you also have this very percussive sound that, you know, Quelle Chris.
Chris, yeah.
Yeah, can you tell us about that aspect of the film?
Yeah. No, I love talking about that stuff, because it just is what I wanted, and from the beginning, but I never thought I'd be able to get, you know. But the one sort of good thing that the pandemic added to this, you know, post-production process is it forced us to have to kind of go about this unconventionally. So our initial plan was to get a bunch of jazz musicians in a space and have them improvise with Craig and Mark and our music editor, Marvin Morris, rather. And we were going to record those improvisations and then notate a score off of that. And then the pandemic happened, so that wasn't possible. And Craig and Mark live on opposite sides of the country, and they were individually composing MIDI jazz on their, you know, synthesizers and computers. And I was like, I can't use this to really give a sense of what this movie is going to sound like, because it's definitely not going to sound like MIDI jazz. And so I reached out first to Zach Cowie, who's ended up being our music supervisor, who I had met through Jesse Plemons, you know, about a year, like a few months prior. And, you know, when I was going into pitch meetings playing The Inflated Tear by Rashawn Roland Kirk, like, this is the sound of the movie. And people would kind of go along with it, but it wasn't like the way Zach, where he literally heard the same thing independently, you know. So we just kind of saw eye to eye in terms of what the music should be. And we found ourselves putting all these jazz cues in the movie. And as we were doing so, I was calling Craig and Mark, like, you guys are losing cues, because there's no way you can compete with Duke Ellington. You know what I'm saying? And they were like, okay, let's a challenge, you know? And then simultaneously, Quelle Chris is one of my, you know, good closest friends, and just someone who I just love as an artist musically. And I just had him in the room with Chris and I when we were cutting, and he just happened to see this one moment where he was like, look, I think I would like to try something here. It's for the shootout at Panther headquarters. And he put this percussive track in there that sounded like nothing else in the entire movie, but was amazing. And I remember thinking, all right, there's no way that the producers in the studio are gonna like go for this, but I'm just gonna put in the cut and let's see what they say. And they loved it. And the only thing they were like, this doesn't sound like anything, but what can we do? And Mark, he really, really fought to sort of try to basically compose something around it. And he did, and we finally found this sound that we'd like been missing. We didn't even know we'd been missing, which was kind of almost like an action movie sound, right? But like it fitting within the confines of this kind of orchestral jazz world we've created, you know? And so I realized, well, we have these other moments in the movie that could use a little bit of tension, and that percussion seems to be adding that. So like I had Quelle and his partner, Chris Keys, just give a few more of those moments, you know, interspersed throughout the movie, and then Mark and Craig composing around that stuff. And then it got to a place where Chris and Quelle would work on a piece of music independent of them. Mark and Craig would work on something independent of them. And when I'd play it for Chris wouldn't know who made it, which team made it. You know what I mean? Like we finally found a kind of uniform sound. So it ended up it's funny because I say like our plan was to do this sort of improvisational jazz thing in a room, but we kind of did it remotely over the course of, you know, several months.
Yeah, well, but it's one of the most unique sounds, and you know, yeah, as you say, it's like nothing we've heard in, you know, in a movie. You know, Dom, the apartment that you share with Chairman Fred it's pretty accurate, isn't it, to the way it was? And you know, tell us about being in that space and getting to act those scenes in an apartment that was pretty much a recreation.
Yeah, I remember shooting the poetry scene where she shares a poem with Fred, and every time I walked into the bedroom, I couldn't stop crying, and then I would walk back out and I would stop, and Shaka would be like, "Look, you gotta hold them tears until." I'm like, "All right, I'm trying." So I get in there. Every time Dane would like talk to me, it would just start coming out, and I would be like, "What's happening?" But I realized that, you know, I prayed to be a vessel. And when you pray for something like that, you can't really have control over it. And so if my body was responding in that way, then it meant that it was supposed to, because I was fighting, like at Shaka, I was fighting all my might not to do it. So eventually it felt like the tears were kind of crawling out of me. And then for the assassination scene, I really I tried my hardest. It was kind of like, how do you cover somebody's body while bullets are coming in, but you are crying because you are afraid, but then you must not show that you are afraid when the lights come on or when it hits you. And I just keep hearing like, have discipline, and like trying all my might. But yeah, I mean, even the assassination scene fell on the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Chairman Fred. And I remember that day when we walked into the place, it was just really heavy. The energy was kind of sad, and I really didn't know where to place it in my own body and my own self. And I just found that I kind of like, wherever Dane was moving, I found that I was moving there too. And I would have commentary that Dom was being weird, like everything, you know, like coming close to him and everything. But at the end of the day, I knew that we had gone through something as a cast and a crew, and it was coming towards the end. And I think we kind of felt that.
Yeah. And Daniel, I have to ask you about re-teaming with Lakeith Stanfield. It's quite a complex character and such a tightrope that he walks with this role. You know, can you tell us about re-teaming and working with him again?
I mean, he's one of the best actors of our generation. It's just the reality. And so I mean, when you're on set and you look around a room and you're seeing Lakeith, you're seeing Jesse, you're seeing Dominique, you're seeing Chris Davis. No one's talking about Chris Davis. My guy, like, it's one of my favorite actors on planet Earth, bro. Like, you're seeing these incredible people. Like, you're just inspired, you know? And Lakeith is he does so much in so little, you know? Like he just, it's very hard to do that. It's not easy to do that, to kind of like, but you feel it off him in the scene. But he's a film star. he's a film star, and that's the reality of it. And it's just for me, it's amazing to see him like show how much depth he has. He was given, like, the script asked more questions of him, and he had more answers. You know, and so in like Get Out, he didn't really have the character. But even what he did in Get Out is incredible. Like, it kind of is a similar space of playing two people, like a double consciousness.
Yeah,
Right? So he's
exactly.
doing the same thing, and like, so it's very challenging to then play something for I think I had a little bit of that in Get Out in a party scene, when you're kind of like having to process that, like, this is happening, and be okay. Like, they don't, the audience, the people at the party are not triggered and thinking that you're being rude, but the audience knows that you don't like them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is that kind of balance? He has that in both characters. He has to continuously be someone he's not, but still you have to register that he is someone inside as well. And people in the scene can't be triggered by it, but we know he's, and that's that's not easy. You know, that's very technical and he makes it look effortless. So it's amazing to work with.
And speaking of shout outs to actors, I have to ask you, Shaka, about little Ray Howery in the role of Wayne, you know, another Get Out, you know, actor, you know, tell us about that role and casting little Ray.
Yeah. So, you know, that role, actually, there was another scene that we shot with that character that we ended up cutting from the movie. But I remember, you know, Ryan telling me that Rel he was like, you know, Rel's from the west side of Chicago, grew up with Fred Hampton just being a mythical figure, you know, just iconic in his life. And he was like, listen, I want any role in this movie, you know. And by the time he said this, we were in Cleveland. I mean, we were like maybe a week away from shooting, and almost every role was cast. And it was, you know, I was like, well, I don't even know if there's anything really age appropriate for him. And that role initially called for an older actor, the role of Wayne. And I just remember going, I don't know if it was Ryan or me who was like, well, what about this role? And we both in that were like, oh, of course. It's like a no-brainer, like absolutely, you know, because it works on multiple levels. Like, one, when you see him, because it's Rel, and you know he's a movie star. You know what I'm saying? Like, when he comes in that late in the movie, like, okay, what's this guy doing here? Also, he's a comedian, so when he starts out and he's telling jokes, you're thinking, oh, he's gonna say something slick, and Lakeith is gonna get mad, and he's gonna punch him in the face and it's gonna lead to something. The last thing you're thinking is that this character is an informant, and is about to just like completely destabilize O'Neill's life. And so it was literally stunt casting, and you know what I mean, the truest sense of the word. But in addition to that, we happened to get an incredible performance from him that I think a lot of people didn't know he could do, because he usually is a comedic presence in movies as opposed to a dramatic, somewhat even intimidating presence. And so I know he was happy, because he was like, I finally get to show this range that I know I have that people don't know I have.
Well, gang, my time is up with you guys. What an amazing film. I'm so thrilled for the three of you, and terrific performances. Shaka, I love this film. You guys are rocks. Yeah, and thank you for being here. Daniel, wasn't it your birthday yesterday?
It was my birthday yesterday.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, man.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Talk to y'all. Bye.